Good morning. Today we are going to start a new lesson, Deep Water. It is written by William Douglas. William Douglas was an American jurist and politician. After completing his graduation, he taught for 2 years in a school in Yakima. But soon, he got tired of his job and pursued a legal career. Douglas was appointed to the United States Supreme Court at the age of 40 and served for more than 36 years, longer than any other justice in the court's history. Both on and off the court, Douglas was outspoken in his support for individual rights and for preserving the natural environment. In this present story, Douglas talks about his fear of water and how he finally overcomes it with strong willpower, courage, hard work, and firm determination. Once he took courage, the fear vanished. This shows that most of our fears are baseless. Fear creates dangers, and this story tells us that whenever there is a will, there is a way. This story is a perfect blend of not only determination, perseverance, but also of strong will and honest labor. It explains that nothing is impossible in this world in case we adopt a positive attitude towards life. Failures and impossibilities are a fool's paradise. Now let's start the story. William Douglas recalls a misadventure of childhood. It had happened when he was 10 or 11 years old. He had decided to learn to swim. There was a pool at the YMCA in Yakima which was very safe. It was only 2 or 3 feet deep at the shallow end and 9 feet deep at the other. The drop was gradual. He got a pair of water wings and went to the pool. He hated to walk naked into the water and show his very thin legs. The author had developed an aversion to the water when he was 3 or 4. His father had taken him to the beach in California. They stood together on the surf. So he recollects the day. The waves knocked him down and swept over him. He was buried underwater. His breath had gone. He was frightened. But his father laughed. And the overpowering force of the waves filled terror in the young author's heart. Unpleasant memories were revived when he went to the YMCA pool for the first time. His childish fears were stirred. But soon he gathered confidence. He watched other boys paddling on water with their water wings. He tried to learn by imitating them. He did this 3 or 4 times on different days. He was just beginning to feel comfortable in the water when the misadventure happened. When he went to the pool, there was no one else. So he sat on the side of the pool to wait for others. Shortly afterwards, a big boy, a boxer, came. He was probably 18 years old and had beautiful muscles on his legs and arms. He called the author Skinny and asked him how he would like to be plunged in water. The boxer boy picked Douglas and threw him into the deep end. He struck water in a sitting position. He swallowed water and at once went to the bottom. The author was extremely frightened but did not lose his wits. He made a plan. He would make a big jump when his feet hit the bottom. He would come to the surface like a cork, lie flat on it, and then paddle to the edge of the pool. Those 9 feet appeared more than 90, but he touched bottom. His lungs were ready to burst. When his feet hit the bottom, he made a great jump upwards, but he failed to reach the surface at once. He came up slowly. His eyes and nose came out of water, but not his mouth. He moved around his legs on the surface of water. He swallowed water and choked. He tried to bring his legs up, but then he was unable to do it. He again went down to the bottom of the pool. He was shrieking underwater because terror had seized him. He was paralyzed underwater, but his heart and the pounding in head told him that he was still alive. When he hit the bottom, he jumped with his full might. But the jump made no difference at all. The water was still around him. His arms and legs wouldn't move at all. He was trembled with fear. He tried to call for help, to call mother, but nothing happened. Then he rose up. His eyes and nose were almost out of water. He sucked for air and got water. He started going down a third time. Then all his efforts ended and he relaxed. A blackness swept over his brain and wiped out terror. There was no more panic. He felt drowsy and wanted to sleep. He gave up all his attempts. He forgot everything. When he came to his senses, he found himself lying on his stomach beside the pool, vomiting. The boy who had thrown him in said, "I was only fooling." Someone said that the kid had nearly died. Then they took him to the locker room. Finally, Douglas walked home after several hours. He was very weak and trembling. He shook and cried when he lay on his bed. He couldn't eat that night, and for days a haunting fear was in his heart. He never went back to the pool. He feared water and avoided it whenever he could. A few days later, he came to know that the waters of the Cascades. He wanted to get into them, and whenever he did so, the terror that had seized him into the pool returned. His legs would become paralyzed. An icy horror would grab his heart. This handicap remained with him even as time passed. Whenever he went, the haunting fear of water followed him. It ruined his fishing trips. It deprived him of the joy of canoeing, boating, and swimming. He used every method he knew to overcome his fear, and finally, he decided to get an instructor and learn to swim. He went to a pool and practiced 5 days a week, an hour each day. The instructor put a belt around him. A rope attached to the belt went through a pulley of an overhead cable. He held on to the end of the rope. They went on this way for many weeks. On each trip across the pool, a bit of panic seized him. Each time, the instructor relaxed his hold on the rope and the author went underwater. Some of the old terror returned and his legs froze. It was 3 months before the tension began to slack. Then the instructor taught him to put his face under water and exhale, and to raise his nose and inhale. He repeated the exercise hundreds of times, and very slowly he shed some of the old panic as his head went underwater. Then the instructor held him at the side of the pool and had him kick with his legs. He did so for many weeks. Gradually, his legs relaxed, and piece by piece he built a swimmer. When he had perfected each piece, he put them together into an integrated whole. He had started practicing in October, and in April, the trainer told him that he could swim. He asked the author to dive off and swim the length of the pool. And finally, he began with crawl stroke. When he swam alone in the pool, tiny remnants of the old terror would return. But now, he could rebuke his terror. This went on till July. Still, Douglas was not at all satisfied. So he went to Lake Wentworth in New Hampshire. There he died off a dock at Priggs Island. He swam 2 miles across the lake to Stampak Island. He swam the crawl, breaststroke, side stroke, and backstroke. The terror returned only once, when he was in the middle of the lake. He put his face under water and saw nothing but only water. He asked terror what it could do to him, and finally terror fled away. Some doubts still remained, so he went up to the Titan to Conrad Meadows, up the Conrad Trail to Mead Glacier. He camped in the high meadow by the side of Warm Lake. Next morning, he dived into the lake and swam across to the other shore and back. He shouted with joy. He had conquered his fear of water. The experience had a deeper meaning for him. Only those who have known stark terror and conquered it can appreciate it. In death, there is peace. There is terror only in the fear of death, and Roosevelt knew it. He said, "All we have to fear is fear itself." Had Douglas experienced both the sensation of dying and the terror that fear can produce, the will to live somehow grew in intensity. At last, Douglas felt liberated. He was free to walk the trails and climb the peaks and to ignore fear. Let's begin with the story. The story tells us how the writer overcame his fear of water and learned swimming with sheer determination and willpower. He had developed terror of water since childhood, when he was around 3 or 4 years old. The writer had gone to California with his father. One day, on the beach, the waves knocked the child down and swept over him. The child was extremely terrified, but the father, who knew there was no harm, laughed. The experience bred a permanent fear of water in the child's subconscious mind. Still, another incident, more serious, increased his terror. The writer was trying to learn swimming in the YMCA swimming pool in Yakima. One day, while he was waiting for other boys, a big boy suddenly played a dangerous prank on him and pushed him into the water. The writer was terribly frightened. He went down 9 feet into the water. When he reached the bottom, he jumped upward with all his strength. He came up, but very slowly. He tried to catch hold of something like a rope, but grasped only at the water. He also tried to shout, but no sound came out. He went down and down. His lungs ached, head throbbed, and he grew really dizzy. He felt paralyzed with fear. All his limbs were paralyzed. Only the movement of his heart told him that he was alive. Again he tried to jump up, but this time his limbs would not move at all. He looked for ropes, ladders, and water wings, but all in vain. Then he went down again the third time. This time, all efforts and fear ceased. He was moving towards a peaceful death. The writer was in peace. When he came to consciousness, he found himself lying on the side of the pool with the other boys nearby. The terror he had experienced in the pool never left him. It haunted him for years and years to come. It spoiled many of his expeditions of canoeing, swimming, and fishing. It spoiled his pleasures in Maine lakes, New Hampshire, Columbia, and Bumping Lake, etc. But the writer was determined to conquer his terror. He took the help of a swimming instructor to learn swimming. The instructor taught him various actions necessary in the swimming part by part. He put his face under water and exhaled and inhaled, raising it above. He practiced it for several weeks. He had to kick with his legs a few weeks on the side of the pool. At last, He combined all these actions and made the writer swim. He learned swimming, but the terror continued. So deep goes our childhood experiences because they leave a long lasting impact on us. So fearful is the fear of fear. Whenever he was in water, the terror returned. Henceforward, the writer tried to terrorize terror itself, and this is very, very interesting. He tried to face the new challenge. When terror came, he confronted it by asking it sarcastically as to what it can really do to him. He plunged into the water as if to defy the fear. Once he took courage, the terror vanquished. He faced the challenges deliberately in various places, like the warm lake, and finally, he conquered his fear.